Hello, everybody. This is Fernando for the latest Half-Life podcast. Well, good news. It looks like the new series here is off to a good start. Already, the first video has a good number of views after less than just one day. So that tells me that, like my Silent Hill series, this new one for Half-Life is going to go pretty well. And as the videos progress, there's going to be more and more attention brought to it, more views. So with something like this that is already off to a good start and good enthusiasm, then yeah, this will definitely continue. So this particular entry, let's go ahead and we'll talk about another monster that is pretty much as famous as the inaugural monster that I talked about, the Vortigaunt. This one is also a classic within the franchise of Half-Life, and it has its own separate fan base, and it's had separate variations or iterations of itself throughout future Half-Life games. But again, for the sake of this video, I'm just going to talk about how it looks like in the first game, and then on top of that it has its own merchandising of some sort, which I'll talk about towards the end of this video. So very similar to the Vortigaunt when it comes to all those aspects. And of course I'm talking about the fan favorite known as the Headcrab. Now, the Headcrab within the first game has now gone on to have several different names because of the way that it changed throughout future games. Several new names have been given to the Headcrab within the first game. It's sometimes known simply as the Headcrab, other times it's known as the standard Headcrab, and then finally other times it's known as the classic Headcrab, because within the first game, the first Half-Life game, there has only been one version of it, and so that's why it's called in some cases the standard or the classic Headcrab. And again, for the sake of this video, I'm solely going to focus on how it looks and acts and came to be within the first game, because so many rich details of later on versions of it in other future games, I'll definitely leave that for future videos. So what is the Headcrab? Well, it's pretty much almost like the Vortigaunt, and it's one of the most common enemies within the game itself, and it's shortly encountered after you meet the Vortigaunt. Much like the Vortigaunt itself is encountered really soon after that chaos occurs, where the entire world in that area starts being assimilated with Zen, or the creatures start coming over from Zen. Here you have an encounter with the Headcrab very shortly after that. In fact, if I recall correctly, it has to do with one of these Headcrabs being found within an isolated location, like it's trapped behind some kind of glass cylinder of some sort, and as you start tapping it or come nearing by it, it starts jumping up and down trying to get out of the glass enclosure. And of course, one of the other ways that it's encountered right then and there is, much like the Vortigaunt, it'll teleport. One of these Headcrabs will teleport in midair and then come straight towards you. So a very memorable creature. What makes it so memorable is that immediately it ties in to one of the most favorite alien-like creatures in sci-fi history, and it has to do with the alien, the Facehugger from the Alien franchise. It seems like this creature, this Headcrab, is a direct nod to that particular creature in the Alien franchise because of the way that they act. Both species try to latch on to the host, in this case a standard person, either a male or female. But the difference is, rather than making sure that it can, I guess, latch on through the throat, here it latches on through the whole face itself. It's a rather nasty way to have an experience like this, because the standard Headcrab, its sole purpose within the Half-Life game is to find prey, and then once it finds its prey, it'll sneak up towards the prey, or in some cases it'll do a surprise attack, and that way you can try to latch onto its face. And then once it does so, then it forms like a parasitic bond of some sort, where it slowly but surely starts to take over the body of the host, and then it turns into its next form, which is the zombie. I'll save that for another video too, because lots of rich history, lots of rich detail to talk about there. Now the head crab, it's relatively easy to beat. It moves slowly, but it does do its surprise attack where it can jump a very good number of feet once it tries to attack somebody. But otherwise, with it moving fairly slowly, it tiptoes, essentially using its little teeny tiny legs. It's relatively easy to avoid, or relatively easy to not have much damage come from these attacks. All you have to do in some cases, if you really want to save on some ammo, just wait to time these things out where it'll land, it'll jump. You can always just move to the side of these jump attacks. And in some cases, it's quite funny because if you are in an area where the head crab, which by the way is not very intelligent, and let's say you're in an area that involves acid or involves electrified areas, all you have to do is just get it to those areas and then move the minute it jumps towards you, and then straight into those electrified or acidic areas where it kills itself. Not very intelligent creature. In fact, these head crabs are known to have probably or have been scripted with the worst AI possible. I mean, there are some instances where multiple head crabs will just keep coming at you mindlessly, even if you start picking them off one by one. They have no artificial intelligence in them to hide or to move or to essentially, I guess, regroup or anything along those lines. Nope, they'll just keep coming straight towards you blindly, and all you have to do is just pick them off. So easy they are, in fact, that you don't even have to use ammo. You can use the classic crowbar within the game itself, a couple of swipes, and then that's it. And then also with regards to the environment, use that as well. Now these head crabs, they have a life it's strange, but if you pay attention to the Half-Life game, you'll see that they have various forms within its life, and you'll see all of their forms. One of the earliest forms is a tiny baby head crab, but ironically enough, it's encountered throughout towards the end of the game itself, and you're looking at a picture of it here. It's laid in multitude by a strange creature called the Gonarch, and these baby head crabs are the actual standard / classic head crabs within the game itself. They're just little teeny tiny babies, and they do some damage on their own too, very very minute damage. It seems like they'll be nipping at you from certain angles. The key thing with them, the main damage can come if you have a whole bunch of them coming straight towards you. Then yeah, you are in a bad area, but otherwise very very minute damage. And then later on in life, as they grow, they become the standard head crab, and then finally its final iteration within the first game is whenever it becomes an adult version, i.e. the zombie, when it's taken over a host, then that's when it becomes its final version. So in a strange way, you do see the entire life of a head crab within the game itself. Various, I guess, models of the head crab have appeared in early versions of the game. In fact, here's a little bit of I guess, a nice feature. You're looking at the earliest known model of the head crab, which you can see it had some of its classic traits, but it looked very different from before. There are the 4 legs, but the legs themselves looked slightly different. But the biggest change was it looks like the face. The earliest known model had something involving what looks to be an eye, which of course final versions did not have any eyes. Nothing involving some kind of facial feature showing 1 eye or 2 eyes or anything like that, but here this one did. And then also the back part of it looked different as well. The color of it looked like it was more reddish, more orangey of some sort. So that was changed too. I wonder at what stage things were changed to make sure that we got the classic version. But yeah, that is the earliest known look for the head crab. Afterward, when it became its final version, pretty much it stayed that way throughout the rest of the franchise, outside of say higher rendered models, obviously, like with Half-Life 2 and some of the other games. This particular model is a classic, and so the classic headcrab pretty much stayed the same look thereafter. Fascinating creature, the standard slash classic headcrab within the first game. Very well known. Enemy of some sort. You would run into them many times within the Half-Life game, the first one, too many to name, for instance, and they were quite fun to eventually to start picking off. I remember there was one instance where it scared the bejesus out of me. It had to do with, I think everyone knows of this instance too. It's where you're in an area involving like a canyon of some sort, and you start sneaking towards the very edge of the cliffs of the canyon. And one of the instances involved you going from that canyon area to a pipe, and you had to climb into the pipe from a precarious edge. And the minute you did so, guess what was waiting for you? There it was, one of these head crabs, because that's how they would attack. They would simply wait for ambush when it came to certain environments. And so the minute you put yourself into that pipe, there came that thing screeching, going straight towards you. And once you knew it was there, it became fun afterward to play a little game where if you moved fast enough, then this head crab, being again as dumb as it can be, it would still jump, but because you moved, it would jump to its doom, because the outside of the pipe led to the outside of the canyon, which was nothing. It was pretty much hundreds of feet down to nothing, straight to the bottom of the ground. And so it was fun sometimes to see this head crab jump to its death over and over again. Crazy stuff with regards to that. And then also what's interesting to note with the classic standard head crab is apparently the makers of the game realized that even with this particular enemy and the way it attacks, you're never going to really see it up close because you don't want it to be up close, because that's when it starts doing damage. But they even did little details, like for example, here's a picture of its underbelly. Now, I'm noting this because with regards to the design, here you have something that was pretty much never going to be seen on the bottom, like on the underbelly side, at least unless you stop to inspect it, let's say after you killed it. But in a game where you're trying to avoid as many monsters as possible, that would have been very brief. But look at the detail that they placed. You can see some of the innards, you could see the teeth that it had as well. And then on the top part, there's even a minute little detail there where you can see eyes. Yes, indeed, the classic standard head crab had eyes. For the longest time, up until pretty much when I was doing research for this video, I thought it never had eyes, but it did. Because when you're looking at this image, you can see they're a little tiny, but they're there. There are 6 eyes, 3 of them on the left, 3 of them on the right. They're towards the fangs, the quote-unquote fangs that this creature has. And so I like the detail that the makers made on this particular model, because again, you're not going to see this. Very minute chance that you'll see any of this detail because of the nature of the monster and what you're trying to do to avoid it, and yet it's there. So pretty interesting stuff. But yeah, standard slash classic head crab, another common monster within the game. It's so popular it is with regards to its fan base that it even has merchandise tied to it, and you'll see some of it here. A very cute plush hat that is awesome when you think about it, because the way it works, you put this hat on and it ties onto your head like any other hat. It just happens to look like a head crab, and then the way that it looks like the head crab has latched onto your face exactly like it has in the game, like the head crabs do in the game itself. Obviously these were popular items and they immediately sold out. You are one of these now, let's say at a Comic-Con, and you'll definitely have everybody taking pictures of it or asking you to take pictures of it. And then also the head crab is one of the few creatures to also have its own mini toy, which you'll see a picture of here. It was a toy version that was included within the Gordon Freeman toy itself, and it shows the head crab there in its classic pose, looking exactly like it was within the game itself. And I mention this because I don't think some of the other monsters had their own toys too, so it's fascinating to see that the popularity of the head crab led to this as well. So, alright everybody, thanks again as always, take care then.